Hello everyone, my name is Mariam Giday. I'll be presenting on the impact that climate change has on the global economy. So in order for us to understand the impact that climate change has on the global economy, we must first understand what climate change is and the various factors that play into the phenomena. So what is climate change? Climate change is a term commonly used to define significant changes seen around the globe in temperature, wind patterns, precipitation levels, and other environmental factors. Some effects that we may have noticed in our lifetime are rising temperatures around the world that have resulted in melting ice caps, as well as rising sea levels and an increase in natural disasters on a global level. So some contributors to climate change are natural, while others are non-natural or human in nature. Let's begin with the natural contributors. Natural contributors are natural processes or events that occur in nature that contribute to climate change. Some include ocean pattern changes like El Nino or La Nina. These are phenomena that happen seasonally or in their own seasons that we can measure. Other things include volcanic activity and variations in Earth's orbit that can also cause large-scale climate change or changes in weather, temperature, things like that. To climate change are a great deal of use in regards to natural or non-renewable resources that we have participated in, such as the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, natural gas. We also participated in deforestation and polluting the world, air pollution, water pollution. Each of these are human acts that have tangible impacts on the environment. For instance, by actively participating in deforestation, we are contributing to what's called the greenhouse gas effect or global warming. Our forests are a huge part of the way the world naturally, or our planet naturally, cycles the carbon that exists in the air. We contribute to this carbon by burning fossil fuels and pollution and all of that. The forests fight this through a process called photosynthesis, in which the plants take in this carbon as their food and release it as oxygen. By destroying our forests, we're actively participating in warming the planet. We're actively participating in climate change. Okay, so in order to understand the impact this all has on the global economy, I felt that I would relate it to the butterfly effect, which helped me understand this process. So the butterfly effect is the idea that a small act here can have a huge impact elsewhere. So if I drop this pen, something of a larger magnitude like an earthquake could take place across the globe somewhere. The term itself comes from the idea that a butterfly flapping its wings here in the States could cause a tornado to occur in Tokyo. So small consistent actions here on a local scale, like individual scale, can cause large-scale impacts later. Individuals choosing to litter, not invest in renewable resources, or overutilizing resources like water and gas and all of that, as well as a nation who chooses not to invest in renewable resources or educating their populace on environmentally friendly practices, practices deforestation, or actively participates in over-farming or doesn't regulate their emissions, and on a global scale, if there's no regulation on different nations or any agreement on how to be environmentally friendly, no awareness, no policies surrounding global law, or a general lack of responsibility on all parts, whether it's individual, national, or on the global scale, ultimately leads to large-scale economic impacts. For instance, with climate change, if we ignore the small-scale parts that we play in that, as we burn fossil fuels and the world heats up, we see a rise in natural disasters. So things like floods occur. When a flood occurs in the United States, the largest scale impact is the destruction of huge industries. For instance, in a study done by Columbia, Texas during Hurricane Harvey lost $125 billion in infrastructure as a state. Nebraska itself lost $440 million worth of cattle. That's livestock alone. So that's the destruction of not only jobs and industries, but entire economic industries. This has a national impact. The economy relies greatly on these things. And on a global level, we all participate actively in trade. And if the environment just takes a toll on every industry globally, we would see large scale and wide scale declines and impacts. California is a wonderful example of this. The state is beautiful and has a multitude of resources, but it also faces a multitude of risks as a result of that. For instance, California is famed for its long and beautiful coast, in fact, 840 miles of coast. However, because it's a coast, it faces the risk of water or sea level rising. So, in fact, in a study done by the state itself, it estimated that 4-foot sea level rise could threaten over $100 billion in damage to property and infrastructure. This also poses the rising sea levels as a result of ice caps melting and global warming also poses a major flood risk to the state, which is a huge danger because the state is a huge source of trade, agriculture, and tourism as well. Another climate change effect that California faces as a state is drought. This is something we witnessed in our lifetime. In 2012 through 2016, we faced a period of huge amounts of drought. This is risky, especially to economic production to the United States and on a global level, because California is the #1 agricultural producer in the United States, as well as on a global scale. It's a powerhouse on its own. For instance, 80% of the world's lettuce supply is produced in the state. But droughts place this at a huge risk because the nation's economy at risk. It plays a huge role in that because when there is no agriculture to be produced or plants can't be planted because there is no water, we lose drastically as far as the economy. Another thing that droughts bring about and climate change bring about is wildfires. California is prone to wildfires. The dry conditions brought on by drought sometimes and global warming on a global scale, paired with the state's grassland and forested areas, create a great amount of potential for wildfires. For instance, 2018's Butte County fire was the state's most destructive. This burned totaling 18,000 structures. That's a great deal of economic loss for the state, not only in agricultural land, but also in structural damage alone. So ultimately, it is evident that climate change has a largely destructive impact on California's economy. Destruction of property by wildfires and rising sea levels is extremely costly, as is the fiscal loss caused by drought and the destruction of the agricultural industry the state is so famous for. Ultimately, the same can be said of the global economy. The cost of climate change to it is profound as well. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, since 1980 there have been 241 natural disasters that have cost the United States alone $1.6 trillion. This is made up of storms, droughts, and wildfires, and more climate change disasters, which have all increased in frequency due to climate change. And on a global scale, this number can be multiplied many times over, which is extremely frightening. One thing I did really want to address in doing this presentation is not only the economic factors, but also who pays those economic factors. Ultimately, everyone suffers from climate change. However, it has been proven that lower income groups are far more dependent on agriculture and will first and foremost pay the cost of climate change. Damages to the climate disproportionately impact minority communities. It's harder for them to prepare, relocate, and adapt after the fact that these climate emergencies take place. The study done by the Global Center on Adaptation states that the climate change could depress growth in global agricultural yields by 30% by 2050. That's a huge risk and fear for everyone, especially those who are participant in the agriculture industry. But it is to be noted that 500 million smallholder farmers in developing countries will be the most affected by it, because they use the agriculture they farm not only to sustain their families economically, but as sustenance as well. Ultimately, the fiscal and financial and economic cost of climate change is great, but so is the non-fiscal global cost of climate change. There is no number, money-wise, that can be put on loss of life, loss of biodiversity, loss of homes. There is no global economy without humans, and certainly not without a planet. There's economic opportunity, however, that comes from climate change, in that we are able to meet the demands of climate change through renewable resources and creation of tools to clean up the atmosphere and environment. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, please reach out to me by email anytime. And here are my resources. Thank you.